In the family, no, but in land as a whole or at school, we used to, or elders or teachers used to speak of the German colonial period, but at that time it was viewed as something positive, as if these colonial masters came to enhance development.
Welcome to the episode 2 of the podcast Decolonial Memories with Dr. Richard Tsogang Fossi. Dr. Richard is a scholar of German literature. For a number of years, he has been involved in research projects addressing colonial legacies, particularly with regard to his home country, Cameroon. He is a member of the research team around Professor Bénédicte Savoy and Professor Albert Guaffot, who produced the Atlas of Absence, a magnificent work documenting the wealth and the richness and the extent of cultural belongings from Cameroon that presently are in Germany as a result of colonial translocations. Dear Richard, thank you very much for joining me for this new episode of the podcast Decolonial Memories. Let's first turn to you as a person. What is something that's important for other people to know about you? And how did you get interested in German language, German literature?
Thank you very much, Thomas, for this opportunity. What I would like to say to my person is that I've been interested as a researcher in German colonial history because I used to study it at the university. And in the meantime, I realized that there were many aspects that were not reached. And while working in the framework of different projects, I came closer to the topic, and that's why today I am still involved in it. And what I found profoundly interesting is the connection between this topic and today's debates, for example, on restitution, repatriation of human remains, and so forth, and so on and so forth. And I have the feeling that if you do not have enough information on the issue, you cannot even discuss the issue of restitution as well. So that's why my research has always been an invite to many others to involved in research processes as well before dealing with that issue of restitution and repatriation.
Thank you. Let's go back to your family life or to your childhood and the youth. Was the colonial legacies and the violence of the German colonial troops, was that something that was talked about in your family or in your circle of friends?
In the family, no, but in land as a whole or at school, we used to, or elders or teachers used to speak of the German colonial period, but at that time it was viewed as something positive, as if these colonial masters came to enhance development. It is in that sense that we were talked about colonial period, and we didn't know about the, let's say, colonial wars, colonial so-called punitive expeditions, and so on and so forth. It's only with time, over time, while dealing with archives and so on and so forth, that we came across all these atrocities during colonial period.
Okay, thank you. And how did you join the team with Benedict Savoy and Albert Guaffo? What was the specific interest you had in that work?
I would say that before this team, I had already been involved in other research projects on German colonialism. For example, in Düsseldorf, where we worked on naming or renaming street names. If you go to Düsseldorf in Oldenburg, you will realize that all the street names are called after colonial officers, merchants, and so on, and those were people who were committing crimes in different colonies. And I was also involved in an exhibition project at the Ethnological Museum in Hamburg, and in that time we were still working together with, for example, with Adbert. And as they came out with the idea of this other project to map all the collections from Cameroon in Germany, I found it very interesting to take part to that micro-history of translocations of cultural heritage from Cameroon to Germany during colonial time. And that's why I decided and wished to join the team.
Okay, thank you very much. Richard, you already mentioned the very impressive research work, this wonderful publication, Atlas of Absence, where you document the cultural belongings from Cameroon that were translocated to Germany. Could you please give us some ideas what for you were the most surprising and the most important insights and results of that research project?
Yes, while engaging in the project, we didn't have any idea of what we were going to meet as findings. We were going from the idea that in France, for example, we have about 9,000 belongings from Cameroon at Quai Branly, and in Great Britain we have about 1,500 belongings from Cameroon at the British Museum, but we didn't have any idea of what we could find from German colonial period, because the Germany was the first colonial period in Cameroon. So going from that, we were really anxious to know what was taken during German colonial time. And it was a great surprise and even a shock for us to realize that during that period, we still have, from that period in German museums, we still have more than 40,000 belongings from Cameroon. That is more than the collections from the whole Africa in some museums in Europe. So that's too much, and it was really a terrifying shock for us to come to that to come to that figure. And what I would also like to mention is that the 40,000 of which we are talking does not represent all the belongings that were taken. We are just talking of what is still there. If I take the sole case of the museum in Stuttgart, before the colonial period, that is in 1884, there was no single item from Cameroon there. But between 1884 and 1914, the museum grew up to 14,000 belongings from Cameroon alone. But today, if you go to Stuttgart, you realize that from the 16,000 that was there after the Second World War, we have just about 8,000, meaning that about 8,000 belongings have got lost or were destroyed during the war, and so on and so forth. And for us, all those figures are really impressive. And like I was saying, that was one of the great surprise in this research.
Yes, now you set up this database of cultural belongings in Germany through approaching or communicating with the museums. What experiences did you make with German museums? Were they all ready to collaborate, or did you have some that refused to provide this information?
Yes, some museums told us that they were not ready to deal with their colonial past. And for that reason, we never received inventories from those museums. And that is one of the reasons why this research deals only with only 45 public institutions in Germany. But in Germany, we do not have only 45 ethnographic museums. So you can see from that figure that many museums were not ready to share their inventories with us and so on and so forth. And it's also an opportunity for us, for me, to thank the museums and the colleagues with whom we work together. And I think that's also a sign of this, of the idea of decolonizing museums, of decolonizing research, and so on and so forth. If you are not ready to open the inventories, if you are not ready to open the stores, I wonder how we can really reach the goals of decolonizing museums. It means that definitely the museums are not the ones to be decolonized, but we have to decolonize ourselves first.
Well, thank you. I think that really is a test of the sincerity of German institutions, at least as a first step to provide the relevant information. Now, you have entered, and the DFG, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, has granted a second phase of the project, which is mainly focused on outreach and dissemination. I understand that you have been going out in Cameroon to talk to different parts of society and institutions. Could you give us some idea of what the responses have been so far in Cameroon?
Yes, that's has been a very, I would say it's a very good experience, because we went from the fact that we produced a lot of knowledge, but that knowledge generated does not reach all the parts of the communities. Or maybe here in Germany, people are aware of it, and the first version of the book was in Germany. In Cameroon, you wouldn't find enough people to read German. And that's why, still thanks to the financial support of the DFG, it was possible to produce another version of the book in French. And while taking the book, the version to Cameroon, we were able to reach many layers of communities. For example, students, researchers, majesties, and so on and so forth. So we have organized so far exhibitions, maps exhibitions at many institutions. We have had conferences and also symposia with many traditional rulers, kings, and so on and so forth. And we were able to share all the data, to share the content of the book with them. And thanks to that, many of them are more and more aware of the whereabouts of their cultural belongings taken during colonial times. Some have discovered that remnants of that story in local oral history now have become real. And I think it was also for us a very interesting moment to realize what impact that research has had and is still having on the local populations in Cameroon. And I think maybe next week there is also a delegation of chiefs of the Maka community in Cameroon who are planning to come to Germany in order to visit their ancestors that were taken during colonial times. And that is also one of the outcomes of the outreach, the work of that we have been doing in Cameroon to reach the different community, to let them know about the story, about the whereabouts of their belongings, and also of the relics of their ancestors taken during colonial times.
Well, thank you. Were there cases with the communities and the traditional rulers where you met some resistance, that they really did not want to address these very painful, traumatic experiences in the history?
I would say that at the beginning, people do not really know what we are going to talk about. But progressively, they realize that a part of their lives, a part of their identities was taken away, and that's how the interest grows. And from the beginning, you really witness some resistance from maybe traditional rulers who are, I would say, they are distant. They do not really know what you are going to talk about. And then when you say you have maybe archives on the story of maybe his grandfathers and so he becomes interested, and that's how you become connected. And from there, the interest grows and grows and grows. And today we are let's say, in cooperation with many chieftaincies, with many communities, to exchange more and more information about this history. And some of them even invite us to talk to their notables, to discuss with them, and they are ready they are ready to receive the archives, but due to the language barrier, they also beg that we help them to transcribe these archives for them to be able to learn more about their story. I can take the case of the Bakoko, I can take the case of the Mabi in South Cameroon, I can take the case of the Bangwa.
Yes, thank you. Turning to the youth, I mean, what's your message or your argument? Why should young people in Cameroon be interested in this long past history?
Yes, I think there lies a great part of their identities. Because the youth are growing, many of them do not even know what their ancestors produced as artifacts, as cultural goods, and so on and so forth. And you see many of these young people grow up without any idea of what is actually their right to cultural heritage, because there is nothing linking them to, let's say, an ancient cultural heritage. What they have at hand, or in different museums in Cameroon today, which are unfortunately empty, is maybe just some, I would say, some items, contemporary works, and so on and so forth. But what their ancestors produced or had produced 100 years ago, many of them do not know about it. And I will also confess here that as a researcher, and also I came to know more about it only while dealing with this issue of colonial displacements of cultural belongings. And I think it's the case with many other communities in Cameroon. And that's why our work is also a fight for the right to know more about their cultural heritage.
Thank you, Richard. Now I would like to turn to the role and the position of the Cameroonian government. How have they responded to all this knowledge and to the Atlas of Absence?
Yes, I would say that before the Atlas of Absence was published, there was a little knowledge about cultural goods that were taken in colonial times, going from the examples or from what was going on in neighboring states. For example, the restitution of the Benin bronze, the restitution in Benin, these 26 objects from the Cape Brownlee to Benin. So from that time, but also even before, the Cameroonian government started to think more about its own cultural belongings taken during colonial times. And as a matter of coincidence, some 6 months before the Atlas was published, the Cameroonian government had decided to create a committee for the restitution to deal with the issue of restitution of all cultural belongings taken in illegal circumstances. And the Atlas was published then 6 months later, and we are also very, it's also something very important for us to see that the Atlas of Absence is today considered as one of the foundational material to know more, not only to know more about these belongings taken in colonial context, but also to give more idea on how to deal with that issue. The Atlas gives also with this figure, not only the figure, but also the places where you find today Cameroonian cultural heritage, especially here in Germany. And I think at that level, the Cameroonian government has been making a good use of it. But I think there is still more to be done. For example, to involve more and more communities, to involve more and more researchers who are really dealing with the issues, also not only from Germany, but also dealing with the issue in other former colonial countries in Cameroon, for example, France or Great Britain.
You mentioned the interministerial committee set up by the government. I understand that there's also a number of subcommittees,
yes,
where representatives of civil society and traditional rulers are involved or have a place. How would you describe or qualify the interaction and the collaboration between the government and the different societal sections?
Yes, I would say in these subsections, there are many people also coming from different backgrounds, scientific backgrounds, and maybe due to that, some points may not be able to be handled as well. But that being said, there are also many other commissions where I think government really took time to choose, I wouldn't say the right persons, but those people who expected that would come out with some results. And I happen to be one of those members. Also, Albert Guafo is one of those members of a subcommission which is called Subcommission of the Provenance Research. And I think that's also a proof that government is saying what is being done and is trying also to look by all means how to go deeper into that issue. I would say that it is also a challenge for a country which did not have until then a precise idea of the whereabouts of its cultural belongings. And to handle that at the same time, I think we also need to have some patience for things to be able to move on as well. Yes.
Now, the expectation is that at some point the Interministerial Committee will approach Germany. What do you see happening? What could be the next steps when they come to Germany, or how would the process and the negotiations evolve with Germany?
Yes, thank you. I think that interministerial committee has already been here in Germany twice, and to have an idea of the whereabouts of some of these stuffs, to get in touch with some museums, directors of museums, and so on and so forth, and also maybe to lay the basis for a discussion. And I know that there was also, of recent, a group of some members of that committee who was to come here in Germany, but I think it did not work. And also a group of German specialists, directors of museums, who were planning to go to Cameroon and not be involved in these discussions at a certain level. I cannot say what definitely happened, but I think going from what I observe from Cameroon, there is need really to look the best way to tackle the issue, because I'm saying it's not always easy to get all that stuff in one day. I mean, all this knowledge of the whereabouts of the objects, and then on the next day to be able to say precisely what one is going to do. And I also believe that even from the German side, it is a challenge, because I wouldn't say that even here people have already a medication, or I would say a recipe how restitution can look like, or how cooperation can look like, or even circulation, and so on and so forth. And as we are speaking, there is an exhibition going on in Cameroon. I think it has ended maybe yesterday, where some cultural belongings came from Germany to be exhibited in the framework of that exhibition. And I think that's also a way how we can deal with this issue. So I think no matter how it takes, how long it takes, I think there is a need, or there are signs from Germany and from Cameroon to join their efforts to tackle that issue as a work of memory, as a way of dealing with their colonial past.
Now, Richard, you have lived in Germany for quite a long time now. What is your view, your understanding? How ready is Germany as a society, as a country, to address colonial legacies? And have you seen some changes over the years?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's a very important issue and a very important question for me as a researcher. I am somebody who has been involved in many transnational projects. And going from that, my experience with colleagues has been a good one, and even a very good one, because there is readiness really to tackle the issue. And there are also people who do not know about this history, and who might sometimes be reluctant to listen to it. But then, what I do appreciate is that even though they found the story difficult, when you come out with proofs that this had happened, these are the archives and so on, people become ready to learn more about it. And I've already given some podcasts where I was talking with colleagues who had not had any idea of the colonial story, and in the end they were obliged to say, "We are really sorry for the fact that we didn't know about this story." And I think we need to speak more about it. We need to share the knowledge that we are producing, because if the knowledge does not reach the people, there will never be some day where they will come about to learn more about that story and to change maybe some mindsets that are like aftermaths of the colonial period. That comes I think that is also where the responsibility of researchers, not only as researchers, but also as people who sensitize other people, comes in. This outreach work is not only maybe in museums and so on, but I think every researcher has to deal with that issue. He has to share the knowledge. He has to look for means how knowledge that he produces reaches the people and so on and so forth.
Looking at civil society and organizations of civil society in Germany, what can they do better or differently to have better collaboration and with initiatives from Cameroon?
Yes, what they can do better, I don't know what to say, but I do appreciate what many people from this civil society already do. There are many of them who carry on projects, freelance workers and so on and so forth, who are really anxious to know more about that story. And there is always the same question: how was it possible that such a story remains for so long without any people having any idea of it? And I think all these organizations, post-colonial organizations, decolonize Berlin, and so on and so forth, in Freiburg, in München, in Munich, in Leipzig, and so on, those are people who are also pushing that issue forward. And thanks to their work, even work from the people from the countries of origin is having also a certain visibility. And I think it is also a proof that research on colonialism needs transnational solidarity and so on and so forth to be able to tackle that issue as well.
Now we'll soon have a new government in Germany. What are your expectations with regard to addressing colonial legacies in general and also on restitution and repatriation specifically?
Yes, my expectation will be for the new government to push that issue forward. For example, to understand that there is no just way how we can maybe hide that story for long. I think personally, I would say that the best way to deal with that story is to let people carry more and more research on it, so that we can come to a point where we can sit together and handle issues of entangled colonial memories and so on and so forth, to move to a step forward. But if we continue to hide the story, we wouldn't hide it for long. At some point or the other, it will still come out and we'll be confronted with the same problems and so on and so forth. So I think personally, I would say the best way to tackle it is, and also to really to give an essence to these, to decolonizing societies and so on, is to tackle that issue from all sides. At political level, at the level of researchers, civil society, and so on and so forth.
Coming back to the second phase of the Atlas of Absence, outreach, dissemination, are there activities planned for Germany in this regard as well?
Yes, of course. We do carry out some activities here in Germany. For example, in June, we organized a workshop here at the Technical University where we invited some scholars or museum professionals to tackle other issues that we felt was not maybe taken into account in the framework of the Atlas. For example, the question of contamination of the collections, which may, in some point or the other, have an impact on discussions about restitution. We also spoke of maybe market networks, how belongings taken from the colonies entered market networks, and so on and so forth. That is one point. Another point is, for example, exhibitions on what we have produced as knowledge using maps and so on and so forth. Here at the TU, we have organized already 2 exhibitions which deals not only with the Atlas but also with other aspects of that colonial history. For example, on the 12th of July, we opened here an exhibition to show how that story started. On the 15th of November, we also organized an exhibition here to show the role of the Berlin Conference in this story of cultural dispossessions. And 3 days ago, we also posted something. There is just a space where we were also drawing the attention of people on the fact that the 26th of February is, in fact, the end of the Berlin Conference. But that end also means the start of another process, because it is on that day that the General Act of the Berlin Conference was issued. And when you go through that General Act of the Berlin Conference, you realize that even dispossessions of cultural belongings was planned. From there, all the way kingdoms were going to be merged together to form colonial empires, and so on and so forth. So we think it is important to have that knowledge to be able to discuss going from a solid basis and not only from hearsay and so on and so forth, or from prejudice and so on.
Okay, thank you. Now, Richard, as our conversation comes to an end, is there a final point or some things that you would want to say at the end?
Yes, thank you very much. What I would like to say is, going from my personal experience and my interactions with German colleagues and so on and so forth, because most of the time you hear people saying that the society or the German society does not want to change. I would say that it is not, there is something which is necessary for that change. It is the knowledge. So if you do not share the knowledge you have on an issue and so on and so forth, you wouldn't say that the society does not decide to change. Because going from my experience, people who are learning more and more on this colonial story really developed another view on the society and even the way they approach colleagues and so on and so forth, because something has happened in them. And I think it is also our responsibility, it is also our task to let people know more about the story to be able to change their views. And I think it's only in that way that we can also enhance more and more networks of solidarity, of transnational solidarity.
Well, thank you very much for these encouraging words, and thank you so much for your valuable, very meaningful insights and experiences sharing with us here on this podcast.
Thank you very much, Thomas.